He's also chairman of the board of science, and he has served as independent director at Mahindra and IIT Madras, amongst others. He currently chairs the board of governors of IIM Indore, and he also serves on the board of the IIT Madras Research Park and is a mentor to many companies. So many of you here who have started out companies, I'm sure you will find the session very valuable. He's also the trustee of the group's AMM Foundation and actively involved in developing various citizenship initiatives. All work and no play doesn't get us forward. So he loves golf, reading, walking, classical music and theatre. Thank you so much for coming here, sir, and I'd love to invite you up here. You are looking forward to listening to the session with Mr. Murugappan. I'll just probably create a framework first and about what we would like to talk about over the next 20 to 25 minutes, and probably leave about 5 minutes for Q&A if any of you have questions. So we would start about how legacy companies actually meander through crises and what advices he has for that. Probably also meander a bit into how we can take businesses abroad and how we can do that. I would love to touch upon the other activities of social responsibility, etc., which today, though a buzzword, was started way before all that by the group. So thank you so much, sir, for being here with us. And I would actually love for you to just give us a small introduction about what you love doing and probably take it from there.
First of all, to TiEcon Kerala, thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor and privilege to be here. And as it would be, at least as it is in my life, I get invited by people and I get instructed by people. So I was very kindly invited by your president, Anisha. And then I was instructed by a whole set of my schoolmates, Johnny Paul being the first of them, and then of course with succeeding generations, Mr. Jacob Joy. So thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here. Jacob asked me to talk about what legacy businesses tend to do, and particularly in uncertain situations. And I'm sure each one of you is very successful in your own way. And but what I think we have done in these uncertain situations is that we've tried to keep a very, very strong focus on cash flow. We've tried to keep a very, very strong focus on cash flow. And over the last couple of years, it's been a great learning for us and for me personally, because I stepped back from the chairmanship of the group 2 years ago, because when we are 65, we step back. But I'm still available to the group. But in that transition, while there was a slowing economy, COVID struck, and more recently the war situation and recessionary trends in Europe. But the single factor is what we've kept very, very focused on is to look at our cash flows. And we looked at cash flows. We were fortunate enough. I mean, we need to be lucky in business a little bit. I'm sure all of you understand that. And we were lucky in the sense that we had built capacities, and therefore this was an opportunity to reduce debt. So from a financial perspective, we focused on cash flows, we focused on the supply chain. But more important than just the finance is to keep the entire team of people motivated and not in any form of despair. So what we decided, and I think it was helped us a lot, is that we decided not to cut back on salaries. We decided to ensure that everyone and their families were taken care of, especially in the time the pandemic was rampant. We lost 77 people across the group. And in one office in Lucknow, it was a 20-member office and we lost 2. And these things hit us because the first wave we lost a lot of people who were on the verge of retirement, much older. In the second wave, we lost a lot of younger people. So what was very important to us is to keep people motivated, and we moved heaven and earth to ensure, to the best of our ability, that we could provide them the support and care, as also their families. And this, I think, is very typical of businesses which have a legacy, and that's something that we've done not just within India, but in all our operations worldwide. We didn't change those basic values.
So basically what you're talking to us about is the human side of business, which many a time is not looked upon because we talk about finance, we talk about marketing, HR is a number. And you're talking about the human side of business. Actually, the crisis brought us to a point where we had to unlearn a lot of things and relearn a lot of things to ensure that our businesses, as it were, started moving forward. Could you enlighten us on some of the steps which you had to do and some of the steps which you thought, probably not some of the steps, where some areas where you thought actually a crisis like this actually helped you learn better and move forward?
Just in terms of operations, just before the pandemic started, we had decided to move from the regular Microsoft Office to Office 365. And every company in the group was up in arms because they had to spend a lot more money on their licenses. So I used to get phone calls, cryptic messages, snide remarks, corridor conversations. We did not know the pandemic was going to strike. But what happened was, the moment the pandemic struck, people find innovative ways of dealing with business issues, dealing with personal issues, dealing with societal issues. So this was one example where then everything was on Microsoft Teams. We didn't even have to ask for it. Everyone kept quiet about all the expense that they had to undergo. So the whole issue was the issue of communication. Communicating objectives, communicating across different plants, is the essence of leadership. And leadership is not just with the boardroom or the chairman. The leadership is with everybody in the company. What is it in terms of their own responsibilities? So this was what was talked about, emphasized, reiterated, reinforced. And that was something that we found people just sort of stepping up with a tremendous amount, at even personal risk. Personal risk. So it helped us identify definitely key people who could be potential leaders, apart from the fact that who could be the ambassadors of our values and what we stand for.
Very interesting, because it actually brought about people who care about the company. And they were the ones, I'm sure, who were in the forefront of the crisis. But to move on from the crisis, I think a positive of the crisis probably was it suddenly made the globe a marketplace. Thanks to Teams and Zoom, etc. Many of us didn't have to travel, work could be done from anywhere. And you're in a business, for example, if you talk about a typical commodity business, and we always look inward towards the Indian market and say we have a fabulous market here, and tend to overlook the opportunities which live outside, probably because we are in the commodity business. Could you give some insight into that and why we should change our thinking into the world as a marketplace?
See, you might be in a commodity business, Jacob, but you are in business, there is a market, and we need to be competitive. Of course, goes without saying, you need to have good quality products, etc. But you need to be competitive. And when India opened up, it was very important for us to evaluate and continuously evaluate how competitive we were. Not relative to India alone. India was proximity in terms of a market. But we had Chinese goods coming into the market. And they were far more competitive than us, including whatever duty structures there were. India was a signatory to the WTO. So it was very important for us, essentially, to place or at least evaluate our products where we stood in the world. Not just products, but also our services. For instance, we've been invested here in Kerala for more than 60 years. And we invested here because at that time we started investing in Kerala. Electricity, a very major component of our business, was perhaps the least expensive in the country. But that changed. So in order to remain competitive with the commodities that we make here, we had to look at other parts of the world. We were not successful in China. We lost a lot of money there because we just could not handle the business environment. But we did invest in Russia. And that has been perhaps our most successful investment so far. And what we did, essentially, because Russia had all the raw materials, but it was very important to see whether we could ensure that we could run the Russian operation or any of our international operations on the strength of that local culture and not try to impose our culture on it. I must say, Russia has been extremely successful for us. Raw materials are available, the power is available. It's much cheaper than what we get in India. And the markets were predominantly Europe. And the business is extremely successful till such time the war started. And now the business operations are good, but transactionally it's extremely difficult. We are not a sanctioned company. Our banks are not sanctioned, but it's still very hard transactionally to work in Russia, but we still do. We still travel back and forth. We still provide the kind of support to the 1,700 people working there. And what I like about the Russian operation is when we took over that plant, there were 7 cars in the parking lot, and today there are more than 700. So the people are also very motivated to continue. So it's something that you cannot be divorced from the world. And you have to ensure that whatever products you make, commodity or otherwise, it has to be to world standard, or at least the aspiration has to be to world standard. Because even in India, as consumers, they do expect that we make products of world standard, and why not? And that's the reason why we're very, very focused on some of these things.
So you hit upon a very important point where earlier in India, we were okay with products which were not the best. Today, as Indian customers, we demand the best of products, and we have the opportunity to get so. But on the other side, market leadership in a company sometimes tends for us to become complacent, wherein we assume that we are the leader and we can move forward with that. What steps do you initiate within the company to ensure that you are like a startup within the organization?
You know, I wish I was working with some of the guys who were in the previous session, because I really miss that environment. But we have made many mistakes. We have been complacent. We have lost market position. But introspection and reflection always is very helpful. So, a couple of years ago, or I would say almost 2 decades ago, where some of our businesses started as joint ventures and then the joint venture partners sold out, we were on our own. One of the things that we did was we invested in research. We invested in research, we invested in working with technical people across the world, we invested in working with universities within India and overseas. And we have about 9 research centers right across the group even today. And some of the products that have come out of those research centers have helped us remain competitive or helped us catch up with what we lost. And I think it's extremely important. I think in Kerala itself, you have some outstanding examples of people who've invested in technology and research, particularly Synthite. I know Aju's here somewhere, and they've really, really done some outstanding work. So we learn from people like that. It's not about learning from people only from your same business. I think we need to be open enough to learn from people with a variety of businesses. At the same time, we cannot have too much expectation. A researcher, whether it's at the university or in our research labs, they like a lot of freedom. And if you sort of pin them down to, I need this by this time, it just won't work. You need to be able to take what they have and then inspire them to do more while you take that and take it to market.
Actually, a good runway into probably what I wanted to ask you next, in terms of, you have industry and you have academia and research. And many a time these are two separate bodies working independently. I've seen you over the years and your interaction with the various institutions across the country, the IIT Madras or even your alma mater, Lawrence School of Data. And I've seen your keen involvement in actually putting your ideas through and creating a bridge between these two. Could you touch upon that? Because as we move forward, I think academia-industry partnership is something which is really important and something which businesses like yours can actually take a great step forward to create a better value on it.
Jacob, the first thing is to understand that we don't know everything. And there must be a willingness to learn. And therefore, then we need to understand what aspirations are. As far as business is concerned, there are so many stakeholders. And all these stakeholders have to be, their interests have to be addressed. I can't put all my time and all the money and all the spare cash, free cash flow into research. There are dividends to be paid, there are investors, there are analysts, there are expectations. And there are people within the company. But the important thing for me is to understand the expectations of the people that you work with. So when you're working in academics, with academics, please understand that their interests may be very different. Their interests may be creating new products, new hypotheses. I think the important thing is to try and understand what their aspirations are, provide an avenue for them to take forward their aspirations, and then distill from that what exactly could be useful to us, and then work on the application side of it. We can be successful, we may file a lot of intellectual property every year. This is one of our companies files about 30, 40 different patents, etc. Some we use, some we don't. And, but it's actually small compared with some of the big companies in the world. But nevertheless, it will be that few, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20 that will work. You must have the patience and the perseverance.
Thank you so much. And I'd probably touch on something which I know is very important for you, and this is not about business, but it's about everything other than business and the give back that I know the Murugappa group does and you personally do, and why it is so relevant today. I know as a group you were involved in this far before the government actually made it a regulation. Today the societal responsibilities of business is something which is more talked upon. Would you like to touch upon that and why you feel this is so important for the business?
See, first of all, I must tell you there are many businesses in Kerala in particular who do a lot for society, but they perhaps don't even talk about it. Why is social responsibility very important to us? First of all, we have to go back into a little bit of business and family history. 4 generations ago, when my great-grandfather started in Burma, he was an office boy. And he did something which was perhaps path-breaking at that point in time, which made him very successful, and succeeding generations took it forward. But what was very important is that who are our customers? Ultimately, our customers are people sitting in this room, directly or indirectly, people outside, service providers of various kinds. Now, how do you make a difference to their lives? And particularly in a country like ours, we don't have social security. So how do you make a difference in their lives? And the only way to make a difference in their lives is to do what you can within your sphere of influence. So over 100 years, we've chosen education and healthcare. Of course, there are many other areas now. But we try to see wherever we are located, we try to see whether within our sphere of influence, whether we can impact society. And I think this becomes very important. We are doing this in Russia at our plant. We're doing it in South Africa. We're doing it in Australia. We're doing it now in a very, very small way in Germany. But I think this to us is very important, and this is a glue that sort of keeps us together.
It kind of is the values of the business speaking out, I would say. But I would just interject with some questions from the audience also. And one of the questions that we've got is it's about the difficulty of dealing with family members in small organizations, typically when you're professionalizing the organization. I don't know who this is, but would like to know, I don't know, how this could be made a little easier, I suppose.
You know, the word professional is used very lightly and very differently. The word professional to me many times is used as purely a classification of a non-family person. Family people are equally professional. I think we should understand that. So it's not a question of family versus professional. The important issue is how do you work together? So the point I'm trying to say is that there must be a willingness to let go. There must be a willingness to let go. It does not mean that a person who's in the ownership of the shareholding, and that's all we own as family. You might own 100%, so you own the business, that's fine. You might own 10%, so you own 10% of the shares. And that's all we own. So the question before me is, it's not so much about professionalizing the business, it's about doing the right thing. What is it to do that? We could not have invested in different parts of the world if we did not have colleagues in the companies. What do you want to do? How do you want to do it? And why do you do what you do? The last is a little deep, but I think it's good to introspect.
I think the question about why we do something is perhaps the most important question, because many times we do a lot of things without asking the why. I have another question for you, and this is again, I'm sure, something something you're asked a lot, I know for sure. How important is personal growth in a business?
Sorry?
How important is personal growth in a business, and how do you manage one person's failures? Typically, as a person heading an organization, you have a lot of people working under you or with you, and failure is part of their growth. So how do you handle something like that typically in an organization?
When you say personal growth, the growth of an individual in an organization,
Both
or
ways.
personal growth as far as I'm concerned?
Personal growth of an individual in an organization, and also personal growth as a business owner.
See, first question is, what is personal growth? Is it the growth in the value of your shares or your wealth? Or is it in your ability and your perspective widening? think these are all questions that we've got to ask ourselves. Yes, companies are valued through their market capitalization or the value that is there in the business. But when you have many people, a business it's an ecosystem. I think everyone is vital to the business. We use hierarchies in order to manage the business. So just imagine in anyone's company, the big boss says, I don't care, I want it done. So what will the next level manager do? He goes to the next level and says, I don't care, I want it done. So then he goes to finally the machine operator. Said, I don't care what, I want it done. If that guy is not motivated, there's nothing you can do. So I think the important thing is to be, it's not about failure, it's not about the personal growth. It's a question of the ability to understand and dialogue this. We all fail, we all make mistakes. First of all, we should have the humility to accept it and the willingness to learn from it.
Thank you. So, probably in the interest of time, I have one last question for you. And it's about the culture of an organization as the organization expands. Every organization has a culture which is very easy to maintain when you're a small group of people. And I'm sure many of us here are small businesses having a culture. But as the organization starts expanding and we have more and more people coming in, how do you ensure that the culture of the organization is maintained? Or if the culture is not good, improved?
You know, I'm learning, Jacob, every day, but I must tell you this. I would not just leave it as culture. I would say values is as important or even more. There cannot be any compromise on values. All right. Now let's come to the culture. In Sanskrit, there's a saying, Yatha Raja Tata Praja. As is the king, so will be his subject. So if Jakobi Chocolatier, apart from making the finest chocolates in the world, and if that culture is transferred, and you're able to say to the next set of people, they are better than me, then this culture will be all pervasive.
Thank you so much. So, what I've tried to do over the last 25 minutes is to just get an overall idea about the businesses Mr. Murugappan is in, and also touch upon the softer aspects of doing business. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. I hope you had as good a time I had being with you on this Fireside Chat.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure. And thank you, TiEcon.
Thank you very much, sir. That was clearly sparks flying all across, I must say. And I request the speaker to accept a giveaway from our end. I request our moderator to please present the little something. It was a reiteration of the age-old wisdom of Yatha Raja Tatha Praja, and again an acknowledgement of the Socratic knowledge where we need to admit that we do not know anything or everything. One's an entrepreneur, an eternal learner. So that is the takeaway. Thank you, sirs. Thank you.